Okay, all right. So it is 9 a.m. now, and I think we can start our class. Hold on, eh. Hmm. Okay, so all right. So as I can recall, we stopped at monitoring and control. Okay, so let me just start my slide. Hold on, eh. Your friends are coming in quite a lot. Yes. Okay, so I think we stopped here. Okay, so basically we have gone through in general what is monitoring and control. Why do we need to have those monitoring and control? Okay, why basically it is a phase after we have the planning and scheduling so that we can actually monitor the progress of our site. Okay, so it's as simple as that. So basically we are talking about measuring, we are talking about comparing what we have actually planned during the previous phase, which is planning, scheduling, and we are trying to make sure our progress is aligned with the planning sebelum tu. Okay, so hence we need to measure to see whether are we at par with what we have planned, compare if we are ahead or we are behind. Still we need to look at it. Okay, so if we are ahead, are we actually using more budget than we require? Okay, or more budget than we have actually allocated? So it is still dangerous. So if we are at the back, then it's worse. Okay, so we are right on top, on dot, that would be fine. Hold on, eh. Provided that the planning was done meticulously, the planning was done with proper information. Okay, so which means the planning is almost, the estimation is almost accurate. Okay, so which means taking into account the resources you have in hand and so on. Okay, before we start, I remembered someone texted me about stakeholder. So stakeholder, before I forget, so this is out of this scope of monitoring and control, the word stakeholder. Okay, so in your assignment it is given the word stakeholder. Stakeholder does not only mean the funder. Okay, so stakeholder means anyone who is in interest. Okay, so with interest, in interest of the project. So it can be as important as the client, all the internal stakeholders. Okay, so we would say, okay, hold on, eh. Okay, so stakeholders are basically, we can categorize our stakeholders. You can find a lot of categorization, but in general, you can say stakeholders can be internal stakeholders and external stakeholders. Okay, internal stakeholders are the ones in a contractual agreement. So you would say someone like the client, the consultant, the contractor. So those are internal, where they are in contract together. So their interest, their participation is memang close lah, closely related with the project. Okay. On the other hand, you might have external stakeholders, but they are still stakeholders. Okay, so for example, local authorities, okay, end user, or anyone that might be impacted by the project. Okay, so it can be passerby. Okay, so traffic users. So those are basically stakeholders, but they are external stakeholders, meaning to say that the project would have impact on them as well as the end user and so on. So stakeholders ni banyak. It's not only the client. It involves people with the contract agreement within the project, and also anyone yang possibly would have the impact from the project as well. Okay, so just to clarify on the word stakeholder tu. Alright. Okay. Coming back here. So basically, there are several stages. Okay, so from here you might look into the classical control stages. Okay, so first you need to measure the state of the system, or basically you need to measure the progress on the site. Okay, so in the last class, I did mention about how to measure. Basically, you need to observe. Okay, so you need to go through what has been done on your side. So cuma as a project manager, let's say you're doing the reporting, you will get the information from your site engineer ataupun site supervisor and so on. So you would have second-hand information lah. Okay, so and then once you have measured the state of the system or what has been done on site, you compare those measurement with the desired state of the system. Basically, you will compare what actually has taken place with what you actually planned for, the baseline. Okay, so that was what do you call developed in the previous stage, which is project planning and scheduling. So you will compare and you would see are there any differences, are there any how much deviation would that be? Okay, berapa peratus, how much differences in terms of the percentage of time, percentage of cost between actual and also what has been planned. And if there are deviation, this is where you take corrective action. Okay, so you need to take control action to make sure that your system goes back to the plan that you have actually developed. Okay, so to return the system to its desired state or to minimize some loss function. Okay, so that is where you have basically, and this process is basically ongoing until you complete the project. Okay, so you do not measure just 1 month and that's it, you leave it. So your measurement goes on, it depends on how frequent you conduct the measurement. Okay, so if you are conducting it daily, of course you'll be better. Okay, so you will be able to actually understand, or you will be actually be knowing where actually the problem roots from. Okay, but if you are measuring or looking at your performance in a weekly basis, you need to kind of check back. Okay, if there are delays in a week, we're talking about quite quite, I mean, I wouldn't say big, but well, the delay will be quite a lot. Let's say the delay started from Monday and you are conducting the measurement on Saturday. So 6 working days of, let's say, supply shortage or um, equipment breakdown, those are where you need to actually solve the problem right away. So rather than waiting for six days. So of course, if you are measuring in daily basis, you are monitoring it in a daily basis, that would be better. But sometimes you might not be doing that. So you might be doing in weekly basis or monthly basis. So it depends on the site itself. Okay, so in a construction project context, okay, so the steps in the control cycle could be considered. Okay, so this is typical. So you will have a plan. Okay, so this is what you have done in the last chapter. Okay, so you have a plan, you have a schedule. So once you have that, you implement the plan. So usually we will follow according to the schedule that we have provided. Okay, so activity A starts when to when, so that is where the subcontractor for activity A will come in, conduct the construction and complete supposedly within the given duration. Okay, so you implement the plan. So once you are implementing the plan, okay, so you need to monitor how much of the output and record it. Okay, so for example, activity A is for a month. Okay, and let's say you are monitoring it weekly. So at least you would have known in a week what should be completed. Okay, so then you periodically monitor it until it completes within a month. Okay, so and then you report the actual and also plan parameters and their variation, and you take action. So if you can see, basically monitoring and control, it doesn't run from here. So you could actually see the I would say redundancies from slide. Okay, so it is just to enforce that monitoring control. Basically, these are the cycle. Okay, so it doesn't run from there. So similar to this, okay, so the first 4 stages constitute monitoring, and the last stage constitutes control. Okay, so similar to what we have discussed. Okay, so monitoring provides quantitative information because you would be resulting it in a percentage manner. Okay, so how much percentage of deviation are we talking about? and this quantitative information would result in a control action. Okay, so quantitative meaning to say that it could be is basically in a numbered form. If you are talking about qualitative, which means it's not in numbering form. Okay, so it is in superficial observation, verbal, without any number given. Okay, so the difference between quantitative and also qualitative. So qualitative can be said by someone. For example, the engineer said, okay, we are delayed where activity B has not started and so on. So you cannot quantify it. It is just a saying. But quantitative is where you observe and you basically note down that how much we have actually delayed or have not started, and it is more reliable basically. Okay, so we can actually quantify it in terms of number. Okay, so okay. So let's say we do not have, okay, so in the absence of formal information from monitoring, the management will take control action based on their informal information such as hunch, belief, advice, and so on. But preferable, we are not making any decision based on just hunch lah. Okay, so this is just, let's say you do not have a concrete information given by personnel on site. So there is no formal reporting or formal information. But this is not the right way. Okay, so when we are doing any decision, okay, so any decision from us, it should be taken seriously, and your decision should be based on informed a proper information. Okay, so which means your decision would be an informed decision. Hold on, let me just informed. Okay, so informed decision, basically you would know the pro, you would know the cons of your decision, and you have alternatives. So sometimes when we look at scenarios, there are various ways for us to solve a problem. Okay, but you need to weigh each of the alternative carefully, because every alternative would have its pro, would have its cons, and how it would affect the others. So this is important, because sometimes we might select certain alternative, but it is just without thinking thoroughly. Okay, so this is where actually your critical thinking is required. So as an engineer on site, you need to be on your feet. Okay, so you need to be, how would I put it? You need to be alert. Okay, so you need to understand thoroughly what are the situation. So that's why you need to get the complete picture. If there are issues on construction site. Okay, so you need to get the complete picture. It is not a hearsay from one party, one worker, or one subcon without looking into the whole picture. So you need to get information from all angles to ensure that your decision is informed. Okay, so this statement here, not really that good. Okay, so hunches, belief, so is this in case you have absence lah. Okay, but I would advise strongly, if you have absence of formal information, you need to get it. Okay, so you need to try to sort for the information what actually happened. So that's very important. Okay. All right. So why do we monitor and control? Okay, so for obvious reasons. Okay, so that your project could be completed within. Okay, so that your project could be completed within the time, okay, so within the agreed duration. So obviously by completing within the agreed duration, you would refrain from getting LAD, liquidated ascertain damages. Okay, so liquidated ascertain damages. Okay, so LAD is basically like a penalty. All right, so you have signed a contract. Let's say you agreed that your project will be completed within, let's say, the end of this month. Okay, so 30th June. However, because of certain circumstances, maybe there are delays in material supply or there are delays in information gathered from a consultant or whatever, you have delayed the completion. Okay, so you belum siap. At this by right, you need to complete by end of June, but you have only completed 90% of the job. So you are left with 10%. So if the client thinks that, because usually once the project ends, okay, as a contractor, let's say you haven't completed, you would try to apply for EOT, extension of time. Okay, so let's say me as a contractor, okay, I'm supposed to complete the project end of this month, but however I'm only 90% complete. Okay, so or 80%, let's say. Okay, so I would seek to apply extension of time from the client. And let's say the client does not allow it and I do not have a strong reason saying that, okay, my extension of time should be granted, then I am liable for the LAD. Okay, so usually the amount of LAD basically is given in the contract. Okay, so it would be given, let's say, 1 day delay, how much penalty is imposed on the contractor. The higher the contract, the higher the LAD would be. So we are talking about tens of thousand, or we are talking about thousand, depending on the sum of a project. So of course, with proper monitoring control, you might complete your project within the duration. If you complete within the duration, of course, you will be refrained from getting LAD. Okay, so what are the reasons that could grant us extension of time? For example, anything to do with weather. Okay, so force majeure. Okay, so for example, it has been raining for a month. Okay, for a week, for example. So that's why it's very important that you actually record you have your daily report. Okay, so your daily report could show you the what they call the weather. Okay, for example. So this actually supports your application for extension of time. And also in your daily report is where you report on any information seek from the consultant, for example. Because sometimes you request for information from the consultant, but it is given and there are any discrepancies in the drawing. But the feedback given by consultant is after 1 week. So that 1 week probably, let's say without the consultant's input, you cannot move on the site, for example. So it affects your weekly progress and you might actually place it on one of the factor for you to apply for EOT. Okay, so all these conditions, okay, so of EOT, so it is given in conditions of contract. So conditions of contract, basically, if you heard of JKR 203 or JKR 203A, so those are conditions of contract. So any project with JKR, you need to use these conditions as stated in the JKR 203 or 203A. Okay. So for private, usually they will use the conditions under PEM. Okay, under architect. So there are several conditions of contract available. Okay, so in Malaysia, such as CIDB and so on. But larger companies, they might not want to use JKR, they might not want to use PEM, they will have their own conditions of contract. Okay, so syarat-syarat contract tu. So before you sign on it, you need to see the conditions, whether do you agree with the conditions. So maybe there are differences in terms of EOT, for example. Usually it will be generic. Usually, however, if there are certain projects which are not typical, there might be different or additional EOT that would be granted. Okay, so conditions of contract is not a very thick document. It's quite a thin document, but it would be in the language of legal language. Okay, so for layperson it's a little bit difficult to understand. Okay, so it will be much easier understood by lawyers lah, obviously, in terms of condition of contract. But I think it's good for you to know as well. Okay, so what could be, at least you would know what could be allowed. Okay, so for extension of time and so on. Okay, so this document consists of your contract document too. So because your contract document would have drawing, specification, and conditions of contract. Okay, so it's a very thick document, guys. So your contract document to see, so it will consist of this as well. Okay, all right. So that's on LED. So other than that, why do we monitor? Of course, to maximize profit. Okay, so because how you manage your project determines how much you can actually profit from it. In general, you have calculated. Okay, so in general, as a contractor, while you're bidding, you have calculated your potential profit. But if you can manage it better with better efficiency on site, of course, you can actually maximize profit. Okay, to maintain company's good image, that comes in like what do you call it? It's a domino effect. If you have all this right, then obviously your company will have a good image from that. Okay, so if you progress too fast, could increase the cost. Okay, if you progress too slow, could also increase the cost. So this could be seen clearly from time cost optimization. Okay, so if you properly do the whole cycle of the time cost optimization. Okay, so effective monitoring and control, obviously the best will be daily, obviously, but how committed the site will be, it depends. Okay, so daily monitoring. Okay, so usually we'll have a discussion with head of workers in the morning and what needs to be done. Okay, so and it should be completed according to the agreed plan schedule. So task is given in the morning, and you can have a discussion with the head of workers in the evening to ensure that the task given completed. And if it's not completed, do we actually require any extension of working time for the day, especially if your activities are critical and you cannot afford for any delays to happen. So then you might need to look into whether you need to extend the time of booking for that day. Okay, and then you might have fortnightly meeting to discuss the requirement, resource problem, okay, material, machinery. So that's why you can see that in terms of time variation here, it depends. Okay, so you can do it weekly if you think fortnightly is too long. Okay, so especially if your problem happens at the early of the first week too. If it's Monday and you're going to have a meeting after 2 weeks at the end of the 14 days, it will be quite far, it will be quite a distance, okay, in terms of duration for you to solve the issue. So typically the shorter the better. Okay, so how often, it depends. Okay, so it depends on the complexity, and also when you are planning, okay, and when you are actually updating the schedule and whatsoever, your input should come from the people who are actually doing the job. Okay, sometimes you might find in a project, okay, so the planner is actually based at the HQ, okay, headquarter, and they only get information based on telephone call, or it's just a conversation that say, okay, this completed and so on, but the picture is not realistic enough. Okay, so because you imagine you are at the HQ and you're trying to update a schedule which has been done on a production based on site, so there would be missing information as such. Okay, so actually the best, or I wouldn't say the best, I would say it is suggested that actually if you're talking about planning, it should be discussed among all involved on the site. Okay, so it is not one man show kind of coming up with the schedule. Okay, so it is not you based in the office and you assume things are happening well and this is how the plan would be. So the updated plan should reflect what actually happens on the site. Okay, all right, so project control. Okay, so project control is where we take action of what has been planned and what are the deviation. Okay, so you have standards. Okay, so targets. So S-curve is the common approach that we use also, or basically this is the planned activity and how we measure the deviation though. Okay, so normally, hold on, so typically on a construction, in a construction meeting, this is the item that they look forward to. Okay, so the S-curve. So they won't be interested in looking into each one of your activities, what are the Gantt chart. So usually they do not have time for it. Okay, so this is the one that they will actually look for. And either, let's say you are monitoring at this, okay, so at this duration, okay, either you are here, either you are here, or either you are here. Okay, so there are differences. Okay, so these differences would be questioned. So why are you behind the planned schedule? Or if you're ahead, wow, what did you do to actually be ahead of the time? Okay, so maybe you are efficient. Okay, so your resource efficient, you did not go over budget, but at the same time, it creates this effective result. Okay, but here would be questionable. Okay, so why is it behind? Was it because which party is basically responsible for the delay here? So from that is where you might find arguments on the construction sites. Okay, this is where actually it will get heated basically. So in order to answer who is to be blamed here, because someone needs to be accountable for the deviation though. Okay, all right, so to begin the process, managers establish the standards. Okay, so the plan lah, basically the plan. And then you can actually plan your cost, your schedule, your quality basis of the standard. Okay, so standards are used to check progress, provide direction. Okay, and then drawing specification is for quality control. So I think we discussed this. Okay, so yes, we will look into the drawing and specification. So this will be checked by either resident engineer for structural or clerk of work for architectural work. Besides that, if you want to measure it quantitatively, you might turn that qualitative nature into quantitative, such as the use of QLASIC. Okay, and then measurement standards serve as a goal. All right. Okay, so actual is basically the one you observe from the site, the one you actually experience. Okay, so second component of the project control. So one is the standard, one is the actual. Okay, so this would show accurate costs or how much you have spent, accurate schedule, accurate quality. Okay, so actual performance compared to planned performance provides the progress. Okay, so this is important. So actual compared to plan gives you the progress. Okay, how you can get the data? So I've mentioned observation. You can go through on-site review. Okay, so walkthrough, quantity reports. Okay, so which you can get it from daily report, weekly report, monthly report, and so on. Okay, so for any question, so this could be typical reporting. Okay, so the budgeted cost versus actual cost with variance. This one back at basic control theory. Okay, so typically is similar. Okay, so you have the work plan. You have created the plan. You initiate the plan. Okay, so while you're initiating the plan, you might have all these external factors giving effect to your progress. Okay, so you might be behind schedule because of material shortage. It can be consultant related, it can be cost related. For example, the client is not providing the payment as monthly as is supposed. Okay, so it can be any factors affecting this, and this is one of the issue that we are actually still having for those from those days until now. Okay, so that's why it's quite difficult for us actually for construction and compare ourselves with manufacturing. This is the factors that give way for us. Okay, so that's why when we are talking about productivity of construction and manufacturing, it differs. Okay, and if we are talking about manufacturing productivity, if you can see, typically it will be represented as such. Okay, so their productivity increases over time, and for us, for construction, it can be as time progress getting lower and lower. Okay, why? Because we have these external factors that manufacturing might not be having. Okay, so that's why we usually associate ourselves as being unique, as being one of, as being complex, and so on compared to manufacturing. Okay, so that's the difference between us. So manufacturing is very routine based. Okay, and we are not. Okay, so we are highly, how to say, we are actually plugged with uncertainties. Okay, and that creates variability. Okay, so high uncertainties, high variability, okay, due to all these factors. So these factors would impact on the field operation, the planned. So those factors basically give way to whatever you have planned. So that will give you actual. That's why your plan with all these factors, it is not easy for you to get the actual and the plan to be the same. But if you can do that by overcoming all these external factors, then you are a very good project manager. Okay, so as a project manager, your task is a lot to actually menepis lah basically, or solve the issues with all these things, and yet you can still provide an actual field data which is similar to the plan field data. Okay, so then it showcases how good a project manager would be. Okay, a lousy project manager or slightly underperforming project manager, you might have a plan, but you gave way to all these factors, causing your actual to be extremely negative in terms of the time, in terms of the cost, and so on. Okay, so next you will have this core schedule engineers to see what could be the recommended action. Okay, so you will provide the analysis. Okay, so analyze, recommend action to the project manager, and if the project manager have outside input as well, so an informed decision should be taken. Then adjust plan as accordingly. Okay, so your plan compared to the actual data. So these are typically some of the project overrun record. So it basically from here you can see that for construction we have been plugged with this problem since very long ago. Okay, so until 2021 we are still having such problem. Okay, so we are still having design changes, insufficient training, cuma poor industrial relation, not that bad nowadays. Okay, because we have this Persatuan Pekerja and so on. Okay, so those days there might be a restriction on having all this industrial relation. Okay, so where workers might not be allowed to have persatuan and so on, so that in order to control the workers, okay, so that they do not retaliate and so on. But still, we do have persatuan pekerja and so on. But still, sometimes for foreign workers, okay, they might not be. So, but sometimes because we are dealing with a lot of foreign workers, how well their welfare is taken care of might be still questionable. Good. Okay, we do have all those acts in picture. Okay, so employment act. So they, especially if they are with permit, so we have the proper act for them. So yeah, well, okay, all right. So we have change in scope. Okay, change in design, you know, so late delivery of material, shortage of labor. So, oh, okay, strike as well. Okay, so especially if you look into manufacturing, manufacturing got a lot of strike, but construction maybe not that much. Okay, so still you have a lot of various reasons. We're talking about as early as this, and in fact until now. Okay, so communication issues, okay, inadequate machinery. So typically these are the factors that would give way to your progress. Okay. All right, so preparing for a project, okay, for construction, so project must be broken down. So I think this one is pretty clear. Okay, so we have gone through this quite a few times. Okay, so broken down to a suitable level. So basically through your WBS, work breakdown structure, you would break it down to a level that you can monitor. So that's why I mentioned that when you are breaking down your work breakdown structure, okay, if you stop your structure at a very superficial level, it's very difficult for you to monitor. Okay, especially if you stop at the level such as foundation and you just stop there. There are a lot of procedures within a foundation. Okay, so you probably, if you're talking about pile foundation, you need to cut the pile to the level, you need to excavate, you need to hack the pile. So a lot of activities or processes that you might miss out if you stop your work breakdown structure at a very superficial level. Okay, so that would not allow you to properly monitor your activities lah. Okay. All right, so cost, time, quality can be set up in schedule. Okay, so you have your baseline. Okay, so baseline is your standard. Okay, so you have your estimate and you have your schedule time baseline. Okay, so okay, the next part is basically cost control. Cuma cost control is not really in your syllabus. Okay, so hence we will just browse through fast. Okay, so cost control is basically how you would actually manage your cost. Okay, so that your contract sum is not exceeded. Okay, so and very importantly, you don't want to lose your profit. Okay, so at the project production phase, okay, so it's the duty of client's professional advisor to constrain the actual project cost to conform to the plan. Okay, so partially if it's for a contractor, it will be the job of the project manager, or if your project manager doesn't do much, okay, so probably the QS, quantity surveyor. But lots of time, basically project manager should be able to manage it. Okay, so it's a duty of the contractor's QS or manager, okay, to oversee the contractor's sum. Okay, so same in terms of whether you're talking about cost or time or whether you still have your plan, you still monitor, you still take action. Okay, so this is typically the job of the client's QS. Okay, so to manage the cost of the overall. Okay, the contractor QS is more commercially minded. Okay, so to manage for the contractor. So you will have the QS for both sides. Okay, so one will be the client, which manages the entire cost. So you're talking about the allocation or the payment to the consultant, to the contractor, to the many parties that you engage in. And contractor is purely on how you manage the site. Okay, so the production and how well you can actually make efficient, and you would increase your profit. Okay, basically for cost, you prepare periodic cost records. Okay, so you have financial statement and so on, and regular comparison of planned cost and also actual cost. Okay, so I would say a lot of this basically is managed by the QS. Okay, so that's why we will just skim through fast so that we pass on to the next chapter. Okay, so cost control, basically, okay, nothing much on this. Okay, so this is still typically the same. Okay, so several information. Okay, so during the cost, so you have the current cost. So if you see, go through the same thing, it's still the same thing. Okay, so it is still basically we identify the actual cost, compare it with the plan. Okay, the project progress to date, and whether the project is expected to overrun in terms of the forecasting. So this one we will look into it when we look into it, earned value management. Okay, so this topic will come after the current topic. So earned value management is a tool used to monitor and control. So it will be a chapter after this. Okay, so benefits is similar. Okay, so you basically, if you're controlling the cost, okay, so you're trying to use your resources efficiently. Okay, so efficient use of machinery, equipment, low cost to the client. Well, the contract has been signed. Okay, typically we are trying to plan, we are trying to execute it accordingly without exceeding whatever we have agreed upon. Okay, but for contractor, if you can actually increase the profit based on the sum that has been provided, then obviously by all means. Okay, cuma that's why sometimes whether your profit is properly attained. Okay, so it shouldn't be any shortcut in terms of material use, standard of the material, standard specification. So that should not be compromised lah. So it is not about gaining profit and then giving quality that is not agreed upon. Okay, so it shouldn't be cutting off material or cutting off the quality of the material whatsoever. Okay, it should be based on a proper planning that could be efficiently done. Okay, so there are two ways of there are a negative way of getting a profit, or a positive way of getting profit. So the negative is the ones that we usually hear about, where lower quality material is being used, as such. Okay, material not to the specification. So that is not how it should be done. Okay, so if you're smart enough, there are better ways to do it. Okay, so which is through proper planning, through proper adjustment, from you actually looking at what could be the potential waste on site. Okay, so waste not only on material waste and whatsoever, you are also talking about human resource waste. Sometimes you can see that on site you have equipment actually hired on a daily basis. So you are paying an equipment every day, for example, 500 ringgit. Tapi equipment tu tak berjalan. Okay, so your equipment is not moving, it's not working, basically, which means you did not properly plan your resource utilization. Okay, if you properly plan it, 1 week complete such activity and the equipment is being used for 1 week properly, without any day that is sitting down doing nothing, then at least you are efficient in using it, rather than you pay it for a month assuming okay it will be used a few days here and a few days there. Probably in terms of your planning is not efficient lah. Okay, so there are better ways of actually gaining profit or reducing the cost expenditure though. So but not through cutting the material specs and so on. Okay, so that is part of the ethics. Okay, and your professionalism. So very important. Okay, so because you guys will be engineers outside, so you have to hold on to the ethics too. sometimes when you go onto the site, you will, how to say, it's like you get influenced by what has been done. Okay, so but if that's something is not right, okay, you need to stand for it lah. I think sometimes we get influenced by, we, how to say, we try to get ourselves engaged with, okay, this is how it goes, but sebenarnya for us this is not right, because people are paying for it. Okay, so the cost has been provided as such with such specification, tapi we try to, you know, manipulate. It's not right. Okay, so when you work, okay, so you get influenced up, front, back, and so on. Okay, so you get influenced by all angles. So make sure that if you think it's not right, then it's not right. Okay, so your ethics is very important once you become an engineer. Okay, and then better utilization of material. Okay, so there are not much of waste on site. Okay, factors affect cost control. Okay, so changes, hold on, factors affect cost control. If there are changes during construction, okay, so if there are shortage of skilled labor, unforeseen shortage of material. So I think I mentioned this before. So sometimes we have material which are not easily accessible. Okay, so which are limited in terms of supply. That will be a problem lah. Okay, so delay in checking approval, workmanship, inadequate machinery, and unreliable subcontractor. Okay, so other than that, you might come across variation order. Okay, so variation order happens when the job on the site, it is required to be done, but it is not stated in the contract. Okay, so that is where you would have this VO. So VO would be additional cost that will be required, how to say, to execute a work which is not given in the contract. Okay, so put it simply, client would basically, this would be very unhappy if there are variation order, because that would mean additional costs for the client outside of the contract sum. For contractor, on the other hand, it will be quite a good news, because this is additional profit that might be included, additional apart from the contract sum. Okay, so variation order happens when you have work identified by the contractor that needs to be done, but it is not in the contract. Okay, but of course, when the contractor identifies that, okay, this work is absent in the contract, it needs to go back to the client. Okay, so client would get a consultant to view it. Betul ke we have to do this job? Okay, if we are not doing this, then we cannot proceed further. So it would actually give a very negative progress, or negative how to say, negative effect to the project. If the consultant says yes, okay, so this job memang additional and needs to go on, then it will be honored to the contractor lah. Cuma whether will it be the full extension or full amount that the contractor requires, or whether there are, you know, consultant might say that, okay, you do not need to do the full scale, maybe half of the scale. Okay, so that is variation order. Okay, next, failure by the contractor to meet the specification, that could affect cost. Wastage would affect cost. Improper maintenance also would affect cost. Okay, if there are frequent breakdown, so when there are frequent breakdown, you affect the progress. Okay, when you affect the progress, affect the time, you affect the cost, and so on. Okay, so you have workers tapi the equipment not working, so membazir lah. Okay, so these are some of the typical Gantt chart. Okay, so this could be easily produced from a project. Okay, and this is basically what I actually intend to do today, but macam tak cukup masa. Okay, so I would want us to produce this S-curve, okay, based on the example we use for time cost optimization. Okay, so finally we want to produce as such from our network diagram. Okay, so S curve is this. Okay, so it's a baseline S curve. Initial plan. Okay, so it's a cost loaded schedule. So whereby Y is the plan time, Y is the cost. Okay, so X is the plan time. Okay, so the actual is, if your actual is below the line, then you are spending less than plan, and if it's above, you're spending more than plan, and so on. Okay, so this is a way for us to actually come up with baseline planning. So I think this will be fine. So we have gone through it quite a lot. Cuma we have created a schedule. Kita belum create a baseline S curve lagi. So I think we'll conduct this baseline S curve at, I think, tomorrow. Okay, so we'll create S curve tomorrow, and we can end this topic with that S curve tomorrow, and the next topic will be earn value. What week is this? Yeah, this is week 11. Week 11. Week 11. So meaning to say that tomorrow we'll do S curve. Next Monday we will do earn value. I think we can cover earn value for maybe Monday, Tuesday, week 12. Week 13 we can do project closure, and project closure is just maybe an hour class je. It's a simple topic. And week 13 juga we can complete that project management, the job of a project manager. And week 14 we can be quite leisure sikit lah. We can maybe just discuss in general to close up the topic. When would be your second test? Dah ada dah time frame given to you guys ke apa? Ke tak ada? Belum But is it within the week 14? Tak ada kan? It will be after that kan? Okay, kalau macam tu I think okay lah, we are quite comfortable. So I think tomorrow we'll conduct on the S curve, and then next week we will conduct on the earn value analysis. That will be 1 week. Week 13 we'll conduct on project closure and also a little bit on project manager. Week 14 we'll take it just general close up to the module. Okay lah, I think that will be fine. All right. Any question for today's class? So for tomorrow we will, hold on. So for tomorrow we will be using this example. Okay, so actually we will be using the network of this lah, senang. So we will be using this activity, this predecessor, this normal duration and so on, and direct cost or cost basically lah. We'll assume this as total cost. Okay, so we'll use this. We will use this part of the example to create our S curve. So for tomorrow, make sure that you have this one, and then we'll try to create an S curve from there. Okay. All right. Any question for today's class? Okay, if there are none, I think we can end the class today. I'll see you guys tomorrow. So tomorrow, please have your paper and your pen together. So I think tomorrow we'll just complete it with the S curve lah. Okay, so I'm not sure whether you take, I don't think it will take 1 hour, but I just need to complete the S curve, and then next week we'll go into earn value. We'll see tomorrow macam mana. Okay, all right. So in that case, I think we can end the class today, right? Thank you everyone for your attention and your attendance, and have a good day ahead. I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Doctor.
Have a good day too.
Thank you, Doctor.
All right.
Doktor,
Yes.
saya nak tanya soalan tentang